You know, if there was one event I would say that I would never cover, it would most likely be DC Bloodlines. And let me explain. You see, in the early 1990s for DC Comics, they were kind of struggling. And not in a way where, like, oh my God, if their books don't sell anymore, they might lose their whole entire comic book company. No. What happened was that DC stuff wasn't really selling like it used to because for Marvel, they had the X-Men, they had Spider-Man, but they also had other properties that were technically selling, like off the chart. Ghost Rider, for example. But also, you had Image as well. Spawn and a few other characters that came from that company were also selling like crazy. But for DC, they were trying their best to figure out what can they do to bring fans back into their comic book line. And so in the early to mid 1990s, we had a lot of DC events. But when it came to DC Bloodlines, it was a tad bit different, and let me explain. You see, for DC Bloodlines, the main goal of this event was to bring in new characters, kind of hoping the new characters would help DC line out a tad bit more. You know, like, hey guys, look, we have all these brand new edgy characters. They're amazing looking, and I'm hoping these edgy characters can bring you guys back into our DC comic book line. Besides reading Batman or Superman or The Flash, we have other characters like Edge, and the list goes on. And so when it came to DC Bloodlines, each chapter was bringing in a new character that DC was kind of hoping would technically take off. But also the fact that, like, when it came to DC Bloodlines, each chapter took place in different annuals across the board. So, for example, this event truly kicked off with Lobo annual number 1. After that, you jump over to Superman, and so on and so on. By the end of this event, you had like what, 20 different chapters, 20 different books that came from 20 different series to kind of tell this overall story that technically wasn't really a story until the very end, when you had DC release a two-part storyline called DC Bloodbath. I want to say it's Bloodbath, could be wrong there, but the last two issues is the actual storyline that matters the most. But I did have a small amount of people wanting me to cover this event, and so I said, okay, cool. You know how this channel works. When we sit down and cover different like Marvel, DC, or any kind of event, we kind of sit down and try to cover everything. So I'm not going to sit down and try to ignore the books unless I have no access to those books. I'm going to try my best to cover every single issue when it comes to our coverage over DC Bloodlines. Now, with all that being said, the first chapter takes place in Lobo annual number 1. And when it comes to the first chapter of the storyline, of course, as you all know, it set everything up to kind of give us an idea of who the main bad guys are, but also the process of DC is using that's going to bring in these new characters that fans might care for. But getting into the Lobo book, right? We do pick up with Lobo right now, interrogating, really more torturing this prisoner. Now, when it came to Lobo around this time in DC Comics, he was part of an organization known as Legion. Now, when it came to Legion, they were put together by the son of Brainiac, better known as Vril Dox. Now, when it comes to Dox, when it comes to Legion, really more, it's a whole idea of this military force that goes around and handles different situations. Now, originally, when it came to this military force, their main goal was to free worlds that were being controlled by some kind of evil dictator. But then over time, you then have become this private military force to be used by different clients. Now, when it comes to Lobo, he's kind of stuck with Legion. And so with him being stuck with Legion, unfortunately for him, he has to follow all the orders that are given to him by, well, Dox, the son of Brainiac. And so once you do have Lobo meet up with, well, Dox, you have Dox introduce Lobo to a new character, and that would be Layla. Now, like I said earlier, when it came to this whole event, you had DC give us a wave of just brand new characters that they were kind of hoping would possibly work and bring fans back into their comics. And Layla was one of those new characters they tried to introduce. Now, when it comes to Layla, at first, it does seem like she's just a regular person that works for Legion and she's very skilled as a soldier. But at the end of this event, we'll see a change in the character. Now, when it comes to Layla, she'll be in charge of the next mission. And the reason why, because for Layla, like I said, she's showing right now that she is a very young but impressive operative for the organization of Legion. And so for Dox, he wants to see how she does on this next mission being in charge. If she does well, there's a possibility that she might be moved over to the core team. And so for Lobo, he has no choice but to go ahead and allow this to happen. Now, it's also them getting their next mission, which is, hey, listen, there was this random rift in space. From that rift, a random spaceship appeared. Now, we have no idea what kind of creatures could be on that spaceship, but I need you guys to go investigate it. Whatever you find, bring it back to me alive. Now, there is another group of characters that do play a somewhat major role for this chapter alone of the whole idea of DC Bloodlines, and that would be the Purple Gang, being led by Captain Poiple. I think it's purple, but it's pronounced Poiple because Poiple. I could be wrong there, but either way, when it comes to this one particular gang, for good old Lobo, he wants to go out of his way to get rid of this gang. And the reason why, because they stole his bike. And so he wants his bike back, but he also wants to get rid of them. Now, when it comes to the gang, they have found the unknown spaceship that Lobo and also Layla were just assigned to. And so for the Purple Gang, their main goal right now is to get onto the actual spaceship and kind of figure out who it belongs to, and also see if there's anything on the actual spacecraft that they can take. But when you do have Layla and also Lobo arrive near the spaceship they were assigned to with their own team of Legion operatives, they also see the spacecraft that belongs to the Poiple gang. And for Lobo, this is great. He wants revenge against the gang for stealing his bike. And so he begins to shoot at them. Now, most of the operatives were able to make it inside this unknown spacecraft. And so for Lobo, even though he did take out a good number of them, he still wants to go after the rest. Now for Lobo, he's also having a hard time being not controlled, but being ordered by Layla. Because to him, he hates the idea of being ordered by a woman, but especially the idea of being ordered by anybody else that's not as good as him in his own eyes. And so for Lobo, he begins to challenge her chain of command. But you then have Layla being able to hypnotize Lobo, to basically force him to do whatever she wants him to do, to kind of keep him in line. Now, you do have Layla and Lobo and their entire team of Legion operatives make their way into the unknown spacecraft. Now, when they do, you do have some of the operatives kind of mention the fact that the entire ship seemed to be organic. It seems to be alive. But of course, for our heroes here, they still have to investigate, kind of figure out what exactly is going on here, and most likely who the spacecraft belongs to. Now, this leads us into chapter 2 of the storyline for this particular chapter. So that is when we move over into the inner parts of the actual spacecraft, right? And we begin to see the main stars of the entire event of Bloodlines. And that would be the Bloodline parasites. Now, there are 7 of them. You have Engon. I want to say it's Engon. You also have good old Gamir, Galoth, Lasik, Praetor, Slod, and Venev. And I'm pretty sure I just butchered all those names. And I know somebody in the comment section right now is kind of like, how dare you ruin the names of these characters, these legacy characters. Guys, I'm sorry. I make mistakes. Let's move on. Anyways, when it comes to these aliens, they're now waking up. And with these aliens, they realize that they have intruders on their spacecraft, which for them works out very well because they are hungry. So the Purple Gang and also the Legion team are about to meet our brand new villains. Now, by this point in the storyline, when it comes to the Legion team, they have split up into two different groups to kind of allow them the ability to kind of investigate the entire spacecraft at a faster rate. And so, one of the teams, of course, the team being with Lobo and also Layla, well, they're now confronted by smaller creatures, and most likely these creatures were assigned to protect the spacecraft while the bloodline parasites had slumbered through their travels into this reality, this dimension. And matter of fact, in the later chapter of this whole entire event, we're going to learn more about where the bloodline parasites came from. But either way, though, you do have Lobo and Layla and a few other operatives of Legion being able to work together to get rid of those, well, smaller aliens. Now, for Captain Purple and his right-hand man, they're still walking around the actual spacecraft. But then you have Captain Purple push his right-hand man after triggering one of the traps. And so unfortunately for the right-hand man of Captain Purple, he got cut off from his captain. But then he's confronted by some of the bloodline parasites. Now, this is where we learn for the bloodline parasites, they do feed on people or feed on really anybody. But when it comes to our storyline, people, and they feed on spinal fluid. And so, of course, you do have the bloodline parasites kill off the right-hand man of Captain Purple as he slowly tries to sneak away before they're able to get a hand on him. But as we switch back over to Layla and also Lobo, we do see their Legion team being able to find the main computer of the entire spacecraft. Now, here's the thing, because one of the guys said the scanners are all saying that this entire computer system is kind of like the brain of the spacecraft. It's alive. It's bioorganic. Now, while you do have this team try to investigate this area, you then have Layla try to reach the other team of Legion. Here's the problem though. They can get a hold of them. And the reason why, because the bloodline parasites are killing them off left and right. Just murdering them left and right. Now, for Layla and also Lobo, they do arrive where the other team was at. By the time they get there, the entire team has been wiped out, and you didn't have the bloodline parasites try to attack the other team. Now, they find somebody else that looks just like Captain Purple's right-hand man. This is where we learn that technically the bloodline parasites, they have the ability to shapeshift as well. But this leads us into chapter 3. And chapter 3 truly does begin the process of, okay, how can DC bring in a wave of brand new characters that fans might care for? Oh, I know. Let's go ahead and use the bloodline parasites as a way to bring in those new characters, like Layla. Now, we met Layla at the very beginning of the storyline, but for Layla, she's just a regular person. So how can we make her more intriguing for fans to care for? How can we give her powers? Well, again, let's use the bloodline parasites. The bloodline parasites feed on spinal fluid, and most of the time, the people they're feeding on dies, except sometimes one of those people might survive the process and gain abilities, like Layla. She was about to die, but the very last second, you had Lobo being able to save her. Now, also in this chapter or this issue, you have Lobo being able to kill off one of the bloodline parasites. And honestly, who cares? But now there's only 6. But now for Lobo, his main goal is to get the heck out of there. And so now you have Lobo trying to carry Layla out of there. Now, for a brief moment, Lobo has to battle against Captain Purple. That battle does not last long enough, but it's also Captain Purple informing Lobo like, yeah, we stole your bike, but also we had destroyed your bike. Your bike is no longer around. But you have Lobo use the captain as a distraction to keep the bloodline parasites busy long enough to allow him and Layla to escape. Now, Layla does wake up, and that right there is a problem. Because for Layla, she does not remember anything at all when it comes to her mission, who she is, why they're there, or the fact that she knows Lobo or not. And matter of fact, you have Lobo try to use this moment as a way to say, like, oh, we're lovers and you and I are very close. Come here and give me a kiss. But she knew right off the bat there's no way that she would be with Lobo. But we also learn here that for Layla, she had gained abilities right after she had her spinal fluid be drank or absorbed by one of the bloodline parasites. Because you do have Lobo say, hey, we have to travel back to our spaceship, but you need a space suit on. And she says, no, I feel like I'll be perfectly okay out there in the middle of space. And the thing is, she's right. She's literally okay and being able to float with Lobo back over to their spacecraft. Now, the bombs do go off, but the bombs do not destroy the spaceship at all, allowing the bloodline parasites the chance to travel to Earth and continue the event, but also feed on more humans and their spinal fluids. And so for Lobo, he does tell Docs, like, hey, listen, mission accomplished. But in reality, mission was not accomplished. We also see that for Layla, she may have a new range of abilities, but the question is right now, will we see her abilities play a role in the storyline in a later chapter? Who knows? But with that being said, guys, this is where we are going to stop today's video. With it being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.